Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, this one's going to be pretty interesting. We're going to be looking at a classic science fiction story
Oh, cool.
called He Who Shrank.
Okay.
We're going to be looking at it through the lens of neurodiversity and specifically AuDHD.
Interesting.
So the source material that we're going to be using for this deep dive is an article. It's called Episode 113, He Who Shrank.
Okay.
And it's written by Jaime Hoerricks, PhD.
Got it.
And they published it on their publication called The Outside.
Okay.
So have you ever read He Who Shrank before?
I have not.
Okay.
No. Should I have for this?
No, not at all.
Okay.
But maybe you can give us a quick rundown of the plot for those listeners who might not be familiar with the story.
Sure. So He Who Shrank was written by Henry Hasse
Okay.
and published way back in 1936 in Amazing Stories magazine.
Wow.
And it's about this scientist who accidentally shrinks himself
Okay.
using this shrinking machine he invented.
Classic sci-fi trope.
Yes, exactly. And what makes it really interesting is he doesn't just, shrink a little bit.
Right?
He keeps shrinking infinitely.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and in the process, he discovers all these worlds within worlds.
Oh, wow.
Even go down to the subatomic level.
So like kind of a similar concept to like those Russian nesting dolls
Yes, exactly.
where you open one and there's another one inside.
Yeah, like an infinite regression kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's so interesting to me already just thinking about it in terms of AuDHD and like how
Yeah.
that might resonate with that experience of like deep diving into a subject.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually one of the main connections that Hoerricks makes in their analysis.
Okay.
They use this term AuDHD coding
Okay.
to describe how, the themes and the narrative structure of certain stories
Right.
can actually, line up with thought patterns
Yeah.
that are often associated with autism and ADHD.
Interesting.
So in He Who Shrank, they're saying that this idea of this recursive journey, it could be a reflection of that deep focus that some people with autism experience.
I see. So it's not just like getting really interested in a topic. It's more about that layered exploration,
Exactly. Yeah.
like needing to dig deeper and deeper and uncover every facet.
Yeah, like that need for completion. Like you need to understand every single detail
Right.
before you can move on.
And I wonder like why that might be so compelling to some autistic individuals.
Yeah.
Is it like a sense of satisfaction from finding patterns or...
Yeah, or maybe even a way to escape overwhelming stimuli,
Right.
right? Like retreating into this world of focused attention.
Yeah, that's so interesting because like when I think about my own experiences, like sometimes I'll get so absorbed in a topic
Uh-huh.
that I completely lose track of time and the outside world just fades away.
Totally.
It's like my mind is creating its own little universe.
Yeah, and just like the protagonist in He Who Shrank, sometimes that can lead to isolation,
Yeah.
as you go further down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, like I'm so focused on this thing and I might not be paying attention to the people or things happening around me.
Right, exactly. It's like a double-edged sword.
Totally. Yeah, like
Yeah.
the joy of that deep focus.
Yeah.
But then also potentially feeling disconnected.
Yeah. And that theme of isolation and otherness is another thing that Hoerricks talks about in relation to the story.
Okay, so we've got this like recursive journey, this deep dive that kind of mirrors aspects of AuDHD. But what about the author himself, Henry Hasse?
Yeah.
Does Herrick suggest that he might have been neurodivergent?
Well, it's important to note that, Hoerricks isn't trying to diagnose him,
Yeah.
from beyond the grave or anything like that. There's not really enough biographical information to even try.
Okay.
But they're using this idea of AuDHD coding as more of a lens
Okay.
to explore how the story reflects certain cognitive processes,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of the author's own neurology.
So it's more about recognizing patterns and
Yeah.
drawing connections between the narrative
Right.
and AuDHD traits.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily matter if Hasse himself was neurodivergent.
Right.
It's more about how the story can be understood through that lens.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think it's a really valuable approach because it just opens up all these new ways
Yeah,
of interpreting and appreciating art.
totally.
It lets us see familiar stories in a new light.
Right. And like you said, it doesn't matter if the author themselves was neurodivergent. It's
Mhm.
more about how we can look at it through that lens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it also reminds us that neurodiversity isn't some new thing.
Right.
These ways of thinking, these cognitive styles, they've always been part of the human experience.
Yeah, they've always been there, even if we weren't talking about them or labeling them.
Exactly.
Wow.
And I think He Who Shrank is like a little glimpse into that history.
Yeah.
The chance to connect with a different way of seeing the world, even though it was written so long ago.
Yeah, it's making me look at the story in a whole new light. what else does Hoerricks point to in terms of this AuDHD coding?
Okay.
Like, what other aspects of the story resonate with the AuDHD experience?
One of the things that really stands out is just the sheer boundless imagination on display.
Yeah.
Like the concept of infinite shrinking of worlds within atoms. Like, it's just mind-blowing.
Yeah, it really
This
is.
is such a cool idea.
It is, and it kind of speaks to this idea of divergent thinking, which
Yeah.
is often associated with ADHD.
Right.
This ability to just like break free from conventional thought patterns and
Yeah.
explore ideas in these unexpected and kind of nonlinear ways.
And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so captivating to readers even today.
Yeah.
Like it challenges our perceptions of reality and pushes us to think about possibilities that are beyond like our everyday experience.
Right. It's like Hasse's inviting us to just step outside that box and embrace a more like fluid,
Yes.
expansive way of thinking.
Totally.
And it makes me wonder if that was something that resonated with him personally.
Yeah. It's definitely an interesting question.
Yeah.
And, beyond just the imaginative leaps, there's another layer to the story that Hoerricks links to AuDHD.
Oh, okay.
And that's the protagonist's hyper-awareness of systems.
Okay.
As he shrinks, he encounters all these increasingly complex worlds,
Right.
but each one has its own set of rules.
So it's not just like random chaos that he's falling into.
Right.
Like there's a sense of order.
Yeah, there's an underlying pattern, even in these like bizarre subatomic realms.
Right. Like a logic to it.
Exactly. And this fascination with patterns and systems
Yeah.
is something that a lot of neurodivergent individuals experience,
Mm-hmm.
especially those on the autism spectrum.
Yeah.
Like they're really drawn to understanding how things work,
Right.
whether it's like a complex machine or a social structure or even just like a natural ecosystem.
It's like they have this drive to decode the underlying logic of the universe
Yeah,
and find the hidden connections that other people might miss.
exactly. And, they're thinking about how this might resonate with readers today
Mm-hmm.
in a world that feels increasingly chaotic.
Right.
There's kind of a comfort in seeking out those underlying patterns,
Yeah. Yeah, like trying to find order in the chaos.
Yeah, like a little bit of order amidst all the complexity.
Right. It's like the story is giving us this blueprint for how to navigate a world that doesn't always make sense.
Yeah.
Reminding us that even in those like bizarre and unpredictable situations, there might be hidden patterns there.
Yeah, and maybe for some readers that search for patterns can be a source of both fascination and anxiety.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Like on one hand, you have that thrill of discovery.
Right?
Like, oh my gosh, I'm figuring this out. I'm piecing it together.
Exactly.
But then on the other hand, you have the potential to feel overwhelmed.
Yeah, by just the sheer complexity of it all.
Right. Or like you said, that fear of getting lost in the details.
And it kind of brings us back to that theme of isolation and otherness,
Yeah.
that we talked about earlier. It's like the protagonist's journey into these increasingly intricate and like unfamiliar worlds.
Right.
It mirrors the experience of a lot of neurodivergent individuals just navigating a world that often feels out of sync with them.
Yeah. It's like the story is tapping into this like fundamental human experience of feeling like an outsider,
Yes.
and struggling to find your place in a world that doesn't always understand or accommodate your differences.
Exactly. And that's what makes He Who Shrank so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
It speaks to these like universal themes of isolation and wonder and the search for meaning
Right.
that resonate with everyone.
Regardless of whether they're neurodivergent or not.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about how He Who Shrank kind of reflects these AuDHD traits like
Yeah.
deep focus,
Right.
boundless imagination, fascination with systems, and even touches on these themes of isolation and otherness.
Yes.
But what about its relevance today?
Yeah.
Why should someone in 2025 care about a story that was written almost a century ago?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And I think there are a few reasons.
Okay.
First of all, it's a good reminder that neurodiversity isn't a new thing.
Right.
Like these ways of thinking, these cognitive styles, they've always been a part of the human experience,
Yeah.
even if they weren't always like recognized or celebrated.
So it's like connecting with a shared history
Yes.
and seeing ourselves reflected in these unexpected places.
Exactly. And it's also a testament to the power of storytelling,
Okay.
to transcend time and cultural boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
This story, with this like simple yet profound premise, still has the power to spark our imaginations,
Yeah.
to make us think about the big questions,
Right.
and to challenge our assumptions about reality.
And maybe even make us feel a little less alone in our own experiences.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And beyond that personal resonance, the story also has a lot to offer in terms of its like multidisciplinary appeal.
Okay.
It's a story that can be enjoyed by science fiction enthusiasts, philosophy buffs, psychology students,
Wow.
really anyone who appreciates a good, thought-provoking read.
It sounds like it would make for some pretty amazing discussions
Yeah,
in like classrooms or book clubs.
absolutely.
Can you imagine like a group of students,
Yeah.
maybe some of whom identify as neurodivergent,
Mm.
reading this story and seeing their own ways of thinking
Yes.
reflected in the protagonist's journey?
It could be so validating for them.
Right.
And such a great starting point for discussions about neurodiversity and creativity and imagination.
It's like you're taking this classic tale,
Yeah.
giving it a new lease on life and making it relevant for a whole new generation of readers.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
It's making me think about other stories, other works of art that might have similar hidden depths when we look at them through this lens of neurodiversity.
Totally.
It's like an invitation to revisit the familiar with a fresh perspective,
Mm.
to uncover these new layers of meaning and connect with the past in ways that we never imagined. Yeah, it really is amazing to think about how a story like this written, decades before we even had the term neurodiversity can give us such a rich perspective on different ways of thinking and being in the world.
Right. It's like these ways of thinking, these cognitive styles, like we've been saying, they've always been a part of us,
Yeah, they're part of the human experience.
woven into our stories and our art,
Yeah.
even if they weren't always like explicitly recognized.
So as we're kind of wrapping up this deep dive into He Who Shrank,
Yeah.
what are some of the key takeaways that you hope our listeners will hold on to?
I think one of the biggest ones is that there's no one right way to think or experience the world. Diversity in all its forms just enriches our understanding of everything.
Yeah.
Like makes us more well-rounded.
Yeah.
And He Who Shrank, I think, really shows us how a different way of thinking
Right.
can lead to like really profound insights and creative breakthroughs.
It's like a celebration of those different perspectives, right?
Yeah.
And how they can challenge us and help us to grow.
Absolutely.
And I think another important takeaway is the value of revisiting these older works
Yeah.
with a fresh perspective.
Totally.
They can find these like surprising connections, hidden depths, and even a sense of validation in these stories that we might have thought were from a completely different world.
Yeah. It's like building bridges between the past and the present.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope this has sparked some curiosity in our listeners and that they might go check out He Who Shrank and give it a read.
Yeah. I think they'd really enjoy it.
You might be surprised at how much it resonates with you,
Right.
regardless of how you identify.
Exactly.
And, thinking about this idea of shrinking into hidden worlds, it makes me wonder
Uh-huh.
if you could shrink down into a world that's hidden within an everyday object, where would you go and what you think you would find?
Ooh, that's a fun question.
Yeah.
I think I would shrink down into the circuitry of a vintage computer.
Oh, wow.
I've always been so fascinated by those early machines.
Yeah.
And to be able to explore the like intricate pathways of information flow, to see the world from the perspective of electrons, like zipping through the wires.
It's like a journey into the heart of technology.
Yeah, it would be an incredible adventure.
Right.
What about you?
I think I would shrink down into a drop of seawater.
Oh,
I would want to swim amongst the plankton and just witness the intricate dance of life
that's beautiful.
unfolding at the microscopic level.
Yeah.
You'd be like entering an alien world.
It'd be like an alien world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Teeming with wonder and mystery.
It reminds me that there are just entire universes hidden all around us.
Right.
Waiting to be explored.
And that's really what this deep dive has been all about, right?
Yeah.
Exploring those infinite realms of imagination.
Yes, within ourselves and in the world around us.
Beautifully said, Will. That about wraps up our deep dive into He Who Shrank and the fascinating world of AuDHD thinking. A huge thank you to Jaime Hoerricks for their insightful analysis.
Yes.
In episode 113, He Who Shrank on the Outside.
Definitely check that out.
Yeah, be sure to check out their work if you want to explore this topic further.
And to all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep embracing the infinite possibilities of the human mind. Until next time, happy deep diving.
Bye, everyone.